Hello everyone. We're here to talk today about the Ranger. There's a lot of Rangers out there that are having a hard time doing endgame damage in, say, a layer of the Mad Mage, having difficulty killing their mimics, having difficulty keeping up with the parties. With that being said, the Ranger is in a fantastic state. There are numerous viable builds for the Ranger. The build that's probably the most viable, that's going to be the easiest to do damage for you, is a Warden melee build. Today I'm going to walk through what comprises a Warden melee build, maybe talk a little bit about, potential best in slots and uh, stuff like that. So without further ado, this is my Ranger right now. Uh, as of early June. Again, this is for mod 16 on PC. Um, as you're going to see from my ability scores, I'm rolling into strength and charisma for all of my stuff. I could, with some of the at wills I'm using, roll some points into int, but I chose to go with strength due to the stamina gain as well, and charisma for both companion influence and a little bit extra recharge speed. Um, you can see that I'm running the Fearbringers for gear. I actually plan on changing that out probably today for the Primal for a little bit more action point gain. Otherwise, I'm running gear that's primarily boosting percent damage. It's been my experience that that gear is actually doing a little bit better for most of the DPS classes than gear that is not giving a stat bonus. You can also see that I'm running the Baphomet set still, or the Demon Lord set, as well as Twin Shadow Stalker rings. Uh, from an artifact perspective, I was running Tales of Old artifact, but for single target damage, I'm running the Soul Sight Crystal primarily still. And then I've got two of the newer artifacts for the greater stats, and then obviously the Shard of Orcus Wand due to the set. Looking at my stats could be a little bit better right now. Working on that. Uh, work on that through mount insignia and stuff like that. So if we're looking at a mount perspective, these are the current mount insignia bonuses I'm using. All legendary insignia, mostly trying to slot dominance for power and companion influence. And then I've got a few spots where I needed to do some other stuff. When I look at companions, I'm kind of stuck on some of the companions that I have chosen, specifically the Scarecrow here for Armor Pen, because while leveling through the Undermountain quests, um, I was running with someone else and did not get the extra purple drops, so I'm kind of stuck with single slot companion gear here. So word to the wise of people coming in council and people who have not done the Undermountain quests yet, when you have the expedition quests while leveling, make sure to solo those as well as make sure that you're picking up all the magic or runic magics. So I'm going to go to Boons quick. So when I'm looking at Boons, I'm really going, power and hit points right up the board. Going for action point gain as well as recovery. And then I go after speed. I like being able to keep up in the group in the dungeon. And I'm going for control resistance. I've also in the past switched this out to companion influence for control resistance. Um, this ends up being about 10% companion influence. It can actually be a pretty good stat boost. But I found there's a lot of control in some of the newer dungeons and some of the old dungeons as well, and this does help a little bit. As far as the Capstone Boon, I go for Deathly Rage. I've done a lot of testing on this, and for the Ranger, this seems to be the best one. I know some other people are running some other things. When you start looking at your guild boons, it depends on where you're at. If you're running leveling content, you're going to switch. If you have the armor pen boon available, you're probably going to want to switch over the armor pen boon so you're closer to cap. Uh, so when we're talking, back to stats quick. When we're talking about stats, the most important stats are really armor pen and accuracy. If you're not meeting the cap values for the content you're playing for these, you're losing damage, and in some cases, a lot of damage. Um, it's way more important to make sure you're capped on accuracy and armor pen than it is to make sure you're capped on, say, crit strike or building up your maximum power and combat advantage, all those, and your defensive stats as a DPS. So make sure you're focused in and capping armor pen and accuracy. So that being said, uh, this is a melee warden build. Um, I'm really this really so if I'm going to talk single target here, I'm going to be running that. So from an at will perspective, your primary at will, go-to at will, is going to be Storm Strike. The one thing about this build is you will never leave the melee stance except for in very limited scenarios, like say the second boss in the layer of Mad Mage, uh, when you're killing boulders. Otherwise, you will literally always be in melee, and this build depends on it. So again, Storm Strike is going to be your go-to single target at will. You're going to use Clear the Ground for your kind of secondary at will. You notice that the magnitude is much lower, right? You look at a 70 magnitude on Storm Strike versus a 20 magnitude on Clear the Ground. Uh, when you're running, when you proc Blade Hurricane, when you have Flurry up, this turns into a 140 magnitude hit, right? That's pretty big. So when we look at encounters, so I generally lead in with Marauder's Rush. It's a big hit. It's got a little bit of a slow cast time. A word of warning: that cast time is on the end of Marauder's Rush, not at the beginning. So you're going to lose about a half a second of your flurry proc. Keep that in mind in your rotation. Uh, my next is generally Hindering Strike. Uh, this is generally my one or two number one damage dealer in Lair of the Mad Mage. You know, competing directly with my Storm Strike at will. Uh, Hindering Strike hits hard. It applies strong grasping roots, which do damage. Um, it's a great encounter power and totally worth slotting in your melee only build. And then third, I run Boar Charge. Again, this has a great magnitude hit. It hits hard, um, for a ranger. Um, these all proc, Blade Hurricane or Flurry, uh, and completely worth running. As an added effect, each of these has some sort of control effect to them. There's a lot of enemies obviously that are control immune, and but for ones that aren't, it can be pretty nice. From a daily perspective, my go-to daily is Call of the Storm. This is just all about enhancing, again, my other attacks. Smooth, fluid, lots of attacks. Uh, and then my other one is Forest Ghost. This is kind of my get out of jail free card, right? I pop floor for Forest Ghost if I'm in trouble. I've got a lot of aggro on me. I can't get the aggro off me. This can really help your tank pull the aggro back. This is especially important if you're running with, a new tank or somebody that's kind of off tanking as your tank. We talk about class features. So when you're running single target and multi-target, Blade Storm. Blade Storm's never going to come off your class features in this build. It is a super important class feature to run. For secondary, if you're running single target, you're going to run Seeker's Vengeance. You're going to maneuver in behind the enemy and run this. Um, there are a lot of runs now. I don't even take this off. If I'm running with a good group that's got a good tank, I can just maneuver in behind the enemies, and it's gotten to the point where it's even habitual when I'm running solo. I just move in behind the enemies, Seeker's Vengeance, and keep Seeker's Vengeance up. Alternatively, if you're running multi-targets, if you're running trash, throw Twin Blade Storm in instead of Seeker's Vengeance. So when we talk about feats, the first feat you're going to take is Focused. So this one is part of the secret sauce at what makes this build so powerful, right? You're going to go into the melee stance, you're going to stay in the melee stance, and you're going to have 10 stacks of focus. Basically, that's an extra 25% damage. Um, your second feat, you're going to run Storm's Recovery. So Storm's Recovery, again, you do an encounter power, melee encounter power, and it's reducing your other melee encounter cooldowns by 3 seconds. Um, with this, you can keep up your flurry procs almost consistently, and you almost have no downtime on your flurry procs. Blade Hurricane. So Blade Hurricane, this is the other part of the secret sauce of this build, right? So when you use your melee encounter power, your at will now does double damage. That's what turns your Storm Strike into 140 magnitude at will. Um, the third one, I take Skirmisher Gambit. Um, in this mod, it's almost impossible not to cap crit with gear. Uh, that being such, I lose 3,000 crit strike and gain 30% crit severity. That's kind of a no-brainer. The alternative to that is, throw caution. The problem with throw caution is that it's a really weak encounter. The encounter itself only hits for 70 magnitude damage, um, and in most runs I've been in, that actually, even with the damage increase, it actually ends up constituting a damage loss. And then finally, as of this last patch, enhanced conductivity was fixed this last week on PC. And as such, this kind of became the best again. Again, because of your recovery, because of Storm's recovery, and because of your own encounter cooldowns due to sinking points in the Cha, you should have Flurry up almost all the time, which makes Nature's Envoy kind of pointless. This really does increase your damage quite a bit. Again, it's great on bosses. It gives you a little bit more burst, makes you a little bit more competitive with some of the other classes. And if you find this information at all useful, please follow me on Twitch. Twitch link is here in chat. It's Lord_Willow_, and I thank you.